Britney Spears once said, "I'm not here to be anyone's perfect image." But for most of her life, the world demanded exactly that from her. Perfection. A perfect smile, a perfect body, a perfect celebrity, a perfect fantasy for millions of strangers she had never met. And the moment that image began cracking publicly, the entire world watched. Some laughed, some mocked her, some turned her breakdown into entertainment. Because long before conversations about mental health became common, Britney Spears was collapsing emotionally in front of millions of people, while cameras followed her everywhere she went. For years, the world saw headlines: the shaved head, the paparazzi chaos, the public meltdowns, the courtroom battles, the conservatorship. But behind the tabloid images, behind the viral moments, behind the global celebrity machine, there was another story, a deeply painful human story. Because while millions of people consumed Britney Spears as entertainment, few stopped to ask what kind of emotional pressure could slowly destroy someone so publicly. The loneliness, the exploitation, the loss of freedom, the exhaustion of fame, the psychological damage of growing up under constant surveillance, and the terrifying reality that once the world stops seeing you as human, your suffering becomes spectacle. This is the dark pressure behind Britney Spears. Before the fame, before the magazine covers, before becoming one of the most recognizable women on earth, there was Louisiana. Britney Spears grew up in Kentwood, a small southern town far removed from Hollywood glamour. From an early age, her talent looked extraordinary. Singing, dancing, performing. Even as a child, Britney appeared emotionally driven to succeed. And quickly, adults around her recognized potential. But childhood fame changes people, especially when adulthood arrives too early. Britney reportedly spent much of her early life performing, auditioning, competing, and chasing opportunities while still emotionally developing as a normal child. Then came the Mickey Mouse Club. Disney, national television, young stardom, industry exposure. Britney suddenly entered a world where image mattered constantly. Appearance mattered, attention mattered, performance mattered. And psychologically, children raised inside entertainment industries often learn something dangerous very early. Love becomes connected to performance. Approval becomes connected to success. And identity slowly becomes dependent on public validation. Then, everything changed. Baby One More Time. The song exploded globally. And almost overnight, Britney Spears became one of the most famous people on earth. The schoolgirl outfit, the music videos, the interviews, the magazine covers. Suddenly, Britney was everywhere. Her fame became enormous at terrifying speed. Millions of people became obsessed with her image. And perhaps that was the beginning of the emotional pressure that would later consume her life. Because while the world saw confidence, Britney Spears was still emotionally very young. Yet suddenly, she was expected to carry global superstardom. The media followed her constantly. Interviewers asked invasive questions publicly. Television hosts sexualized her while she was still extremely young. Journalists treated her private life like public property. And over time, Britney Spears slowly stopped belonging to herself. She belonged to the world. That is one of the darkest psychological realities about celebrity culture. Eventually, people stop seeing the human being. They only see the image. And Britney became one of the most consumed celebrity images in modern history. Then came the relationship with Justin Timberlake, one of the most famous celebrity couples of the early 2000s. At first, the world romanticized them completely. Young, beautiful, famous. But when the relationship collapsed publicly, the media frenzy became brutal. Britney faced enormous public criticism. Meanwhile, many people later argued that media narratives treated Justin and Britney very differently emotionally. And psychologically, that imbalance affected Britney deeply. because by this point, her private pain had become global entertainment. Then came marriage, motherhood, paparazzi obsession, and suddenly, the pressure surrounding Britney Spears became almost impossible to escape. Photographers followed her cars, surrounded her constantly, documented every emotional moment publicly. There were periods where Britney reportedly could barely exist peacefully outside her own home without being chased aggressively by cameras. And psychologically, living under that level of surveillance changes people. Especially when the world constantly demands perfection from someone emotionally exhausted already. Then came 2007, one of the most disturbing celebrity breakdowns in modern history. Britney Spears shaved her head publicly. The images spread across the world instantly. And instead of asking, "Is this woman emotionally okay?" much of the world laughed. Talk shows mocked her. Tabloids profited from her pain. Paparazzi continued surrounding her relentlessly. For years, Britney's emotional collapse became public spectacle. And perhaps that period revealed something deeply uncomfortable about celebrity culture itself. Because millions of people watched a human being visibly struggling psychologically, while the entertainment industry continued monetizing the breakdown. Then came the conservatorship, one of the most controversial chapters of Britney Spears' life. Following her public struggles, Britney was placed under legal conservatorship controlled largely by her father and legal teams. For years, questions surrounded how much freedom Britney truly had over her career, her finances, her personal decisions, and even aspects of her daily life. Yet during this same period, Britney continued performing tours, residencies, albums, public appearances, and that contradiction deeply disturbed many people later. Because if someone was considered mentally incapable of controlling their own life, how were they simultaneously capable of maintaining a massive entertainment empire? Over time, the hashtag Free Britney movement exploded globally. Fans began re-examining years of media coverage, court documents, public appearances, interviews, and slowly, public perception changed. People who once consumed Britney Spears as celebrity entertainment began seeing something else. A woman who may have spent years psychologically trapped inside systems larger than herself. Then came one of the most emotional moments of Britney's public life. Her courtroom testimony. For the first time publicly, many people heard Britney Spears speak openly about control, fear, exhaustion, loss of freedom, and emotional suffering. The testimony shocked millions. Because behind the pop icon, behind the performances, behind decades of media chaos, there was finally a human voice speaking honestly about pain. And perhaps for the first time in years, people stopped looking at Britney Spears as spectacle. They saw a human being. A woman emotionally exhausted after spending most of her life under public control. Eventually, the conservatorship ended, and across the world, many people celebrated emotionally. But psychological damage does not disappear overnight, especially after decades of pressure, surveillance, public humiliation, and emotional exhaustion. Even today, Britney Spears remains one of the most discussed celebrities in modern culture, because her story represents something larger than fame itself. It represents what can happen when celebrity culture stops recognizing humanity. Today, Britney Spears remains one of the most influential pop stars in music history. Her music defined generations. Her image shaped pop culture forever. Her success transformed entertainment globally. But behind the success story, there is also a darker human story. A young girl pushed into global fame before emotional adulthood, a woman psychologically consumed by public pressure, celebrity treated more like property than person, and a human being who spent much of her life fighting for emotional freedom while the world watched from a distance. Because sometimes, the people who look most glamorous publicly are suffering the most privately, and sometimes, the world destroys people slowly, while calling it entertainment. If you enjoyed this documentary, Subscribe to Dark Human Stories for more psychological celebrity documentaries, emotional fame stories, hidden struggles behind greatness, and powerful untold human stories. And remember, fame does not protect people from pain. Sometimes, it magnifies it.